Okay, here we go. Zok Tehillah Gemara. So we are up to Daf. Hey, Dalet Amud Aleph. Now we were discussing stories about the monasin and people collecting. No, it wasn't Pedal. We're past there already. We're on Pehei Amud Aleph. We're on Pehei Amud Aleph. We are up to the more that talks about. We had the story with the feast of the ship yesterday, which Shmuel referenced yesterday, and I believe we are up to Hahi Itza, right? Because the last thing was when the shliach didn't get the star back after he paid off the choiv. The question is, the shliach liable? And the Gemara says that he is. And I actually made a mistake the way I typed it yesterday, because I typed it that the Beichazoi owed Avimai money, and Avimai was getting money from the Beichazoi. In fact, it's the opposite. Avimai owed Beichazoi money, and he sent a shliach to pay the Beichazoi, and the shliach didn't get the star back from the Beichazoi. He owed Beichazoi, or they owed him. Against him, exactly. So he owed Beichazoi. That's right. That's right. Okay, so let's see the Gemara right to two dots. There was this woman. She had a whole bunch of stores that were by her. Now she didn't own the stores. What happened was somebody had a lot of people who owed him money. Therefore, he had a whole bunch of stores from people who owed him money. And he took the bunch of stores and he gave it to this woman to hold for him. Not that she's the Balchoy, she's just holding these papers for him. And what happened is also Yorshim Katavu Lei Mina. Now, she also happened to have been owed money. So this fellow, let's say Reuben, had hundreds of people who owed him money. Because of that, he had hundreds of stores. And he gave it to this woman as a bekadon. But it also happens to be that this man owed her money. So she needs to extract now money from the assignment to pay for her chayvus. Now we learned yesterday that if a balchoiv is toifus mechayim, because remember we had the machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon holds you could even be toifus lachar misa, but Rabbi Akiva says you could only be toifus mechayim. So if she would have been toifus mechayim, then she could keep whatever she was toifus, and then she could collect on her chayv. But if she was only toifus after the person died, then she has to give it back to the assignment. So she had these stores, but she had the stores b'teres pikadon from the person who owed her money. And she said, Amr lahu, she said to them, Mechayim tefisna lahu. I was toifus mechayim. In other words, even though I was watching it for him, I had made up my mind that now I'm seizing it. So it was in my hand as his representative. That's not called tfisa. But once she changes her mind and she says, no, now I'm seizing it, now it's a tfisa. So also like Rab Nachman, when they came to Rab Nachman, Amallah, he asked her, Islach Sahadi, minach mechayim v'loyavis neheli? You can't just in your mind say, now I'm being typhus. There has to be something that shows that you're being typhus. For instance, the person who owned these stars, he came to you and said, I want my stars back. And you said, no, I'm not going to give it to you. Now that's a tfisa. That's not a tfisa, that's right. Loy. She says, no, I don't have Adam that, in fact, I resisted returning them. So that shows now I'm seizing them. Zok Gemara, Im Kain, have a tfisa de lachamisa. So Rab Nachman said, then we have to consider it like you're only seizing them after this person died, meaning you typhus them from the assignment. And like we said, tfisa de lachamisa loy klum hi itza. Another story. There was a woman, the Ichaiva Shavua Beidina the Rava. She was mechuyev to make a Shavua at the best of Rava. So let's say, for instance, what happened is someone came over to her and told her, you owe me $1,000. And she was moed b'mitzvus. No, I only owe you 500. So now she's mechuyev to make a Shavua that she only owes 500. Amar Lei Bas Reb Chisda, the daughter of Reb Chisda, who was Rava's wife, she was involved in the Torah. Maybe since there was a lady involved, Rav Chisda made sure that his wife would be there, and she told Rava, you can't let her swear. Yodanaba dechashuda ashvua. I know this woman. She will just lie. So you cannot let her swear because she's going to swear falsely. So the halacha is when the kishenegda is chashud, whenever a person is mechuyev shvua and they're chashud, what we do is we put the shvua on their baldin. So now the person would have to swear and extract the money from it.
How is Rob's wife's information not what's wrong? One person.
So that's a very good question. It's a very good question. So it's going to open up a whole new avenue and discussion about what information a dayan is allowed to use and what he's supposed to use and how a dayan is supposed to assess situations. Very good point. So let's see what happened over here. Let's look at the whole story and then we'll have that discussion. So Rava said that the person who's claiming, he's the one who's going to make the shvua to extract the money from him. Zimnin, another time. So here we see, as Avigdor highlighted, that Rava is listening to his wife to discredit a woman to prevent her from making a shvua. But another time, have a Yosy kameder a papa v'Rav Ada bar Masna. Another time, Rava was sitting there, and Rav Papa and Rav Ada bar Masna was there. Aisu ahu shtar gabe. A star was brought to them. Amar le Rav Papa, and Rav Papa said, Yodanabe the shtar priyahu. I happen to know that this star has already been paid up. So now the star isn't really valid. Amar le. So Rava asked him, Ika inish achwina bahadei demar. Do you have a second eight? Like Avigdor said, can't just believe one guy. Do you have another eight? Yes, Rav Papa. Amar le. So Amar le, avagab the ikamar. Even though you say that this star is already paid up, eid echad lav klumu. So Amalei Rav Ada bar Masna, I don't understand. Rav Papa, the great Rav Papa, you don't trust when he tells you there's a problem there. Rav Papa, kavas Rav Chisda. Why you trusted your wife when your wife said that she can't make a shvua? So why wouldn't you trust Rav Papa? Zok Gemara, look at this. Bas Rav Chisda kimli begava mar like kimli begavei. I know my wife. Zok Rashi, the kimli begava, the loy mishakra. I know that my wife will not lie. Rav Papa is a very harsh of a person, but I don't know him as intimately as I know my wife, and therefore I cannot rely on him. So the Rambam brings up from here that exactly what Avigdor is suggesting, that a dayan does not only stick to the basic tenets of law, that you need to aid him. If a dayan knows something's fishy, something's wrong, he has to inject his own common sense and his own adjustment and his own assessment into every situation to make the call. And yes, even though halachically, the wife of Rav Chisda, the wife of Rava, the daughter of Rav Chisda, has no namanos, but if a dayan knows that something's wrong, a dayan has to take action. And there's a whole big shaila, the post coming down, that nowadays, that even dayanim aren't squeaky clean, they shouldn't do such things. But the Rambam has a whole stickle of how, yes, a dayan has to inject his own knowledge into things. It's not just a process and a system that you follow the rules. A dayan has to use his own common sense and his own intuition to make a call. Amar Papa, hashta da Amar Mar, kimli begavei. Since Rav Papa did say that I know that the star is paid, so although I can't accept his words completely, but milsahi, hashta da Amar Mar, kimli begavei milsahi. Now that Rava said that if I trust someone like my wife, and because of that, I have to rely on that, and I can actually change the psak because of it, which is the chiddush that we're saying, that the dayan has to make his own call sometimes. So it could go in Abamar Barei, Abamar, my son. So Rav Papa said, my son, the Kimli Bigavei, who I know my son intimately, that whatever he tells me is rock solid. Because of that, Karana Shtara Apume. If someone comes with a star and claims to collect with the star, and my son will tell me that the star was already paid, I will tear the star up. Correct, Gemara. That's a little radical. Karana Sol Kadaitach. He said, sure, you can believe him, but the Ad Kedekach, he destroyed the star. Elamarana Star Apume. I would take away the strength. I would make it bad. What does that mean? Rashi says, I won't allow the person presenting the shtar to collect, but I'm not going to tear it up. Tosha says, what I might demand is a shvua from the malva that he didn't collect it on the shtar. But I definitely wouldn't throw out the shtar, but I definitely would take action due to the fact that my son, who I believe tells me the shtar was paid, I'll require some extra type of evidence. Hahu itza, the Akiva shvua beidina to Rav Bibi Barabai. A woman was mechuyev a shvua at the bezdin of Rav Bibi Barabai. The article explains this very beautifully. He says what happened was a woman was in a situation of moedim miktzas, and she was being forced to make a shvua, but there was no bezdin in their little village, so she traveled with the person who's making the claim against her to the city of Rav Bibi Barabai to do the din Torah. Amar lahu hahu baldin. So the baldin said, "Teisi v'shishtaba b'masa." I don't want to swear in this city far away in your Bibi city. You know why? Because nobody knows her here. Nobody knows what happened. So she will be able to swear falsely, and there's no pressure on her. But if we go back to my village, where we come from, where everybody knows what happened, there she'll be too uncomfortable to swear falsely. So I'd rather have her make the shvua back at our village. Because Efshir de Michsefa Umoiti, she might be embarrassed because people are going to look at her terribly with her false shvua, and then she'll be moida. Amar lahu. So she said, fine, but what's going to happen is I'm going to schlep back to my village, make a shvua, and then I'm going to need a ksav from Bezdin that says that since I made a shvua, I'm potter now to pay. Now the problem is then I'm going to have to schlep back again to the Bezdin of Habibi. So this is what I want you to do. Do me a favor, write it up already now. So write me right now. Amar lahu, she told the Dain, kasvali zichvasa, write me a zichvasa. And Rashi says the definition of this zichvasa is shabasi ladin, that I came to the Bezdin, v'niftarti heimenu b'shvasi, and I was niftar, I made a shvur, and now he has no claim against me. So he can't come again and claim against me. I have proof that this is already being litigated. So therefore, the chimish tabana, when I swear, yahavali. So I'm not asking you to give it over to me, write it up, don't sign it, but write up the nusach, and then when I swear in my city, then we'll get, maybe you'll appoint a shlich bezin in my city to sign it that will validate this proclamation. Amalu Rabibi Barabaye, so Rabibi Barabaye told her, Kisula, he told the shlich bezin, yeah, you could write it for her. Write up a start for my bezin that I'm saying that she came to me and she testified and she swore in front of me and she's potter, but we won't sign it, we'll have them sign it later. Omar Papi, so Papi said, how could you do something like that? Mishum dasisu mimuloi, since you come from Muloi, Rashi in his first verse says from Bnei Eli, you are grandchildren of Eli HaKohen, and we know that there's a zera on Eli HaKohen that people won't live past 18, past 20. Right? I think Abai and Rava, we said Abai and Rabba were from Bnei Eli, but they lived longer because of the Shul Torah, because of the Chos Chesed. But since you come from a cut-off door, I'm reaching Milisa. You're saying cut-off words. You're saying wrong words. How could you possibly write this when you know it's not true at this point? When someone brings a star and he needs it to be validated, so what they do is the Aiden who signed on the star say testimony, yes, we signed the star, or other Aiden come along and say, we recognize the signatures of these two Aiden, we know the star is legit, and then Bezdin writes a validation on the star. So what happens if they write the validation? The Michtava Mekamed in the Havi, the Nachvu Sahadi, Achasim Sedai. So they wrote up the script that this star is good and we verified it, but they don't sign it until after they actually verified. But they wrote it before they verified. It's psula. You know why it's puzzle? Alma Mechsek Shikra. Even though technically it wasn't signed before, but there's a concept of Mechsek Shikra. If something doesn't look right, if it doesn't smell right, it doesn't pass the smell test. Because here they wrote something up. Here they wrote something up before it actually happened, and it's inappropriate. So how can How could you are Bibi Baba write up a nusach that she already swore in front of me when it didn't happen? You can't do that. Zok Gemara Velesa. But the truth is, this whole chashash of mechzek shikra is not a valid concern. And as a matter of fact, we will write something up even before it happened, as long as it's not signed and ratified before the actual proof happens. And we know this from Rab Nachman. We do Rab Nachman. Rab Nachman, Omer Hayer Rab Meir. Rab Meir used to say, what happens if it's expensive to hire a cipher to write up a get? What if a guy finds in the garbage a get that's perfect, that his name properly spelled, it has her name properly spelled, it has her city properly spelled, all the details of the get would be exactly what he would write up today. Somebody else wrote it and discarded it. Could he use it? So Afilu Matzah Ba'ashva v'chosmu, and he signed the get. V'nosmla, and he gave it to her, kosher, it's going to be kosher. Now that's Mexican Shikra, because that clearly was written up not for him. V'afilu Rabbanan, even the Rabbanan who argue and say this is not a kosher get, loy pligi alei Rab Meir ela begite nashim. He's only arguing by a get the be'inon ksiva l'shma, because by get it says v'chasav law, it has to originally be written l'shma. But besides that requirement of written l'shma, avol b'shar shtaris moidule. By every other star, it would be acceptable. Meaning, there's no chash of Mexican Shikra. It's only if there's a technical problem. What if I borrowed $100,000 from somebody and I wrote him up a star, and the same day that I borrowed the money, I paid him back, and now I want to borrow again? So can I reuse the same star? It has all the information written in it properly. Why should I write a new star? So what did Rabbi Yochanan say? That you cannot use the same star to be live. Why? Not because it's a mechzek shikra. It's nimchal shibudai. A star is a magical piece of paper. It creates a lien on all of my properties. The lien that this star has created has already evaporated. By you using it again, it will not create that shibu. No, mechzek means there's no technical problem. It meets all the specifications of what the document needs. It's l'shma. If it was l'shma, if the sheep would take care of, but the problem is it smells.
There's a specific din that has to be l'shma.
Right. So that's what the Rabbanan said, that the get won't work. But if let's say you don't need l'shma, let's say you don't hold that the document has to be written l'shma by a get, then it could be used.
That's the basis of the
Not everybody holds it. It's a machlekes tonight, right? The Gemara says only the Rabbanan says you need l'shma, you need ksiva l'shma. So if you don't need ksiva l'shma, if it's just a question of because it doesn't smell right, because it looks like it's fraudulent, that's nothing to worry about. So time with the nimchal shibuda, once again, the only problem with reusing a star is because there's no shibud on it. And if that's the case, but the mere fact that it doesn't look right, there wouldn't be a problem. So let's think, you might not be able to use it as a star choiv, but when it comes to a bezdin writing a proclamation, either that we know that this star has been properly validated, or in our case, if they're writing up that she swore and now she's put to the day, there's no issue, there's no technical issue there. Why can't you write that? Even though, and you don't say mechzek, you don't say it looks wrong that he wrote it before it was signed. So that's how the Gemara remains. In fact, we're not worried about mechzek shikra. So based on this shaila, based on this Gemara, somebody asked Reb Zilberstein as the following shaila. He was owed money and he was going after this guy for a long time, and the guy wasn't paying. So finally, the guy gave him a check, but the check that the guy gave him was 3 months old. We know a check goes stale after 6 months, and you can't cash it. And he didn't cash it fast enough. And by the time he was also schlepped the guy, by the time he wanted to deposit the check, it was now stale. So the shaila was, is he allowed to change the date on the star and like an initial to refresh in the star? Or is it mechzek shikra? That's the shaila of our Gemara. Now you see, we're not worried about mechzek shikra. So at first, Reb Zil was instead that first of all, if he has to sign to Tom Sheker, he's forging because he's going to make someone else's initials. That was one. The other problem is you're ruining the leva because this guy, when he gave you the check, he assumed that you're going to cash it within a certain amount of time, at least within 3 months, and he made sure to have money in his account. If 3 months go by and you didn't cash the check, he might not be careful to have money in his account. Now the check might bounce, and then he's going to get hit with a surcharge from his bank for bouncing the check. So he wasn't sure. But then he says, but since you're having a real hard time collecting, and this is like your only chance, I don't let you change the date and make it initial. But what I'll let you do is, let's say if it says February 1st, you can put like a 9 after the 1, so you say February 19th. That wouldn't require initials because the bank wouldn't be able to tell that was modified. So he said that he would let him do in this case only, because otherwise he won't be able to collect. I remember when I was a boy in yeshiva, I had to rent a car once to come home to Toronto, and I had renewed my license before when I was in Toronto last. But what they used to do in the olden days is they would stamp your license with a 90-day extension until you got your new license in the mail. That was even before the license had a picture on it. So there was a red stamp on my license extended for 90 days. And I realized that when I went to rent the car, it was like the 95th day. So they wouldn't rent me the car, even though I had a license, but I didn't have proof of the license. The new license was already arrived back in Toronto, but I was in Philadelphia. And it said extended for 90 days. So what I did was, it was a red stamp. I took a red pen and I put a 1 in front of the 90. And it's all extended for 190. Okay, no problem. I don't know whoever extends it for 190 days, but it worked. So that's mamish the eitzah that the Rizoshan gave him. Kizok the Gemara Balter. Who gavra the afkid shov marganiso the tzari b'sedina beirav miyasha barbared Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Someone gave us a pekadon wrapped up in a shmata 7 jewels. I think margolias are pearls. So 7 pearls in one shmata. Who did he give it to watch for him? He gave it to Rabbi Miyasha, the grandson of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And his mazel, by the time he came to pick up his pekadon, shchiv Rabbi Miyasha v'loy pocket. Rabbi Miyasha didn't tell anybody in his family, by the way, this here is a pekadon from this man. He didn't say anything. So now the person who owns it's got to go to the Yisraelim and get it back. But the Yisraelim are going to say, we don't know that this belongs to you. So they went to the entire. Also, look, I made Rabbi. Rabbi said, you can give this man back his jewels. Why? I have no suffix this didn't belong to Rabbi Miyasha because he couldn't afford these types of jewels. He was a person who you wouldn't expect to find this. So it must be a pekadon. And this person is giving a simon. Simna, because the simon was that there's 7 wrapped up in the shmata. That was considered a simon, although Tosfos disputes whether that would be a good simon. But he's giving a simon, and therefore you can give it back to him. But Veloy I'm only going to say this, that you can give it back to this person who's claiming that it's his. That's only if the claimant wasn't someone who frequented the household of Rabbi Yasha. Because if he was always in and out of the house of a ruggle, then I would have to be concerned that this is not his, but since he's been in the house so frequently, he saw it there. So he was aware of it, and that's why he's coming to claim it. But since this fellow never or rarely visited Rabbi Miyasha, and he's coming with a claim, and he's giving simonim, and we know Rabbi Miyasha couldn't have owned these items, I'm going to say you should return these items to the claimant. Who governed the Avket Kasa the Kaspa Bechasa? He left a silver becher in the home of Chasa. Shachav Chasa, and he didn't give instructions. Also, look, they came to Rav Nachman. Amalu, he said, I know Chasa didn't own this becher because he couldn't afford such luxury items. And the claimant actually gave us him. And once again, and I don't trust this fellow coming to make the claim. That's if he didn't frequent the household, so therefore he wouldn't have known about it unless it was his. Maybe somebody else is the one who gave the pekadon to the nifter, and he just saw it, and that's why he's claiming it. Someone gave Rav Dimi an expensive silk beged to watch. Achva Rav Dimi, Achva Rav Safra, who happened to be the brother of Safra. Shachav Rav Dimi died, and once again he didn't give instructions as to whose beged this was. I know Rav Dimi didn't have such clothing, couldn't afford such clothing. And in fact, the person who's claiming it gave a simon. And once again, Amar and Ella, the Rogel, the Al Nafik Hazam, Amal Rogel, the Al Nafik Hazam, Ema in the Shachrina Ifkid, maybe this really belongs to somebody else. You Mechsa Chaza, and he was aware of it. Well, this is not someone saying three halachas. This is the Gemara relating stories. You want to know why the Gemara wanted to say all these stories? That's a good question, but maybe there's a tzrichas in each type of object, or maybe we're just trying to show that different dayanim all held the same halacha. See, oh, so to show that this is like unanimous, everybody holds it. Hey, shkoyach, beautiful. Shkoyach. So that explains. I thought it's to give the Maggid Shir an easier time preparing, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is because to demonstrate this over and over. I guess so. Again, we're on Kesubos Shas Gemara. This no longer has anything to do with Kesubos. Yeah. Okay, so who the Amar Lahu? How did this whole sugya start? How do we get on this tangent?
The woman who came for sure.
Yeah, but what did that have to do with Kesubos? Yeah, because it all goes back to the Mishnah that says someone who dies and leaves and has nechasim that are by a malva, right, in Pekadim, and there's three claimants against it. Who gets it? Who's in charge? So we end up saying the Yartzeit are in charge. From there, we had the Machlokes of Akiva and her paraphin. If you can be Tovis from Yarshim, we came up past like Akiva that you cannot be Tovis from Yarshim. You have to be Tovis Mechayim, and then for Tovis Mechayim is where we had the guy claims. She claims she was Tovis Mechayim. She had to prove she wasn't Tovis Mechayim, and that led to these Namonas Kamach. Someone wrote in his will, I want to leave over my estate to Tuvia. Shachivi died, also Tuvia. Tuvia came. So there's many people with the name Tuvia. So how can we give it to the first Tuvia that comes? Tuvia came. So we can assume it's him because he knew that his friend wanted to leave it to him. So if he shows up and says, I'm the man, we can trust him. What about Amar Tuvia? He said, I want to leave in the Chasam Tuvia, but for us a Rav Tuvia. But someone came who was Reb Tuvia. He was the guy. He was Reb Tuvia. So the halach is he doesn't get it. L'Tuvia Amar, l'Rav Tuvia lo Amar. Sorry, sir, you don't qualify. You're not Mr. Tuvia. You're Rav Tuvia. The Gisbei, but if the person who wrote the will is buddies with this Rav Tuvia, Hagisbei, then he might have referred to Rav Tuvia as Tuvia, and therefore you can give it to him. What about also Shnei Tuvia? One was Shachin, one was the neighbor, the Talmud Chacham, and the other one was not a neighbor, but he was a Talmud Chacham. So the halach is Talmud Chacham Kodim. The Talmud Chacham goes first. Let's see what Rashi says. Talmud Chacham Kodim. The Mistama Adam Matzdik Maisav Liskois B'Shas Misa. A person would typically B'Shas Misa want to give his money to a Talmud Chacham. The Amar Mar Kol Naviva Nisnabu El Mahana Talmidei Chachamim Minachas. So a person wants to do the right thing, and it's good to be Mahana a Talmud Chacham. Okay. So Zok to Gemara, what about Korah of a Talmud Chacham? What if it's your relative or it's a Talmud Chacham? Again, Talmud Chacham played. Iboilahu. How about if it's a Shachin the Korah? One was a neighbor, one was a relative. My Tashima, the pasuk says, Tov Shachin Korah me'achrachai. It's better to be close to your neighbor than a far brother. Shneim kroivim u'shneim shchenim. What if you have two people with an equal claim? They're both kroivim, they're both shchenim or shneim chachamim. So then you do shuda the daini. What shuda the daini is a very big shaila. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi says shuda daini. Shuda does Rashi hatolos hadayonim. It's left to the dayanim. Lefimashi yiru dayanim shoyadaka shomais. They have to make an assessment on this person. This person who was unclear with his instruction, they have to read into his mind and figure out what he probably meant. L'karav hazeh Yosy b'zeh. Oymisha b'shneim toiv. V'noig b'derech yishara sheyesh loymar boy nischav v'nameis liskos. They have to somehow figure out who the person who gifted it meant to give it to. which is somewhat difficult, especially if they might not be familiar with him, but they have to figure that out. They have to make the call. Tosfos argues on Rashi. So if we look at the third line in Tosfos, Tosfos should have done, but like a Pirsha Kuntris, Shapirish, Shal Yomer had the other die Toy, Shal Noising, Lemir Tony Litin Yoser. We're not asking the Dayanim to read the mind of the Noising to determine who he wanted to give it to. Hello, Amir Ben Atam, Shedai Nitain, Lemi Shayirtse. Shooting the Dayan means the Dayan can pick whoever the Dayan wants. Whenever it's not clear, the Dayan can pick whoever the Dayan wants. And therefore, you better make sure to write your will clearly, or be sure that whoever the Dayan wants, you would want as well. Okay, that's called his Dayan wish.
I think the Shrafi said, do your giving while you're living, so they'll be knowing where it's going.
Oh, very good. Very good. Excellent. Okay, no, it could be a guy who wants to give someone his Yerusha, but he doesn't want his kids to hate him. He wants his kids to say Kaddish for him. So what he does is he's ambiguous. So his kids will still think they meant him, but the dying will paskin that they meant who he really wanted to give to. Okay, let's see the Gemara right. So we have this halach of shooting the dying. Amalei Rabbi Lebrei, Rabbi Bar Avraham. Rabbi told the son of Rabbi Bar Avraham, Ta, come, Eimelech Milson Mal Yusa to have an Amar Avah. I'm going to tell you a beautiful halacha that your father said. Had Amar Shmuel. This that Shmuel said, if someone sells a shtar choiv to his friend, so someone owes me $1 million, and I go to my friend and I say, I'm willing to sell you this shtar choiv, pay me 900,000, and he buys it, and then and then the seller is moichel the choiv, that's literally stabbing the guy in the chest. Mochel, the mechila works. Va'afilu yorish moichel. And even if the person who sold the shtar dies, and his son who's yarshning him is moichel the choiv, the person who bought the choiv is out the money.
I understand. If we have a shibud Rab Nosson, then how is a person able to be moichel if somebody else bought the shtar?
That's a beautiful kasha. Let's the Gemara brings up the Gemara will introduce shibud Rab Nosson soon. Zok Gemara about moide Shmuel b'machnesa shtar choiv lebaila. What if a woman is owed money and she marries, and now her husband takes over her chayvus, the chazra umachlosoi, and she was moichelit, she'ena mochel. That mechila won't work. Remember, we learned earlier, machlekes Abai and Rava, where Abai said yadai kiyada, and Rava said yadai is adifa miyada. So since he has more control over her loan, therefore she will not be able to be moichelit. Okay, the Balter. Now you asked me about shibud. I think it's the Gemara. I believe it's the Gemara. I just wanted to make sure it's not. It's not Tosfos. I know. So let's see the Gemara right. Krevasa Rab Nachman zevinta luksubasa v'toivasana. Rab Nachman's relative sold her ksuba. Now, when you sell a choiv, if it's $1 million choiv, a person will buy it for 900,000. But a woman whose ksuba is worth 100,000, if she sells this, it's not worth 90% of its value because she might die first. Right? Who said she'll ever make the claim? So therefore, it's worth a pittance. So let's say it's $100,000 tshuba, she would sell it maybe for $10,000, maybe for 10 cents on the dollar. It's less, but no, it's for much less than its full value. Igrisha, she got divorced, which means the person who bought it hit the jackpot because he's going to be able to claim on it. But ushchiva, but then after she got divorced, she died. Asu katava le'labarta. So, of course, the person who bought the ksuba is now coming to collect from her Yorish. Rashi says, also l'kuchosh, the katavi l'labarta, habal ligvas ksuba sima mayavia. Right, her son would be claiming the ksuba payment that's owed to his mother from her husband. And once he claims that, the person who bought the ksuba will be entitled to that. So the son will, the daughter will claim it from the father. And they're coming to take it from her. Your mother sold this to us. So Amul Rab Nachman, leka the lasvela etza. We need to find an etza to get rid of this purchaser because we want to retain the money by the child. So once again, Rab Nachman isn't the dying here. but he's getting involved in a dispute. So this is what she should do. Tezel v'tichla l'ksubasa de'ima l'gabe avua. Her mother was married to her father, so let her be moichel the ksuba on behalf of her mother to her father, and then when her father dies, she'll yashin her father. V'tir saminei. So she just has to wait a couple more years till her father dies, and then she'll get it. So what she's succeeded in doing is getting this lakeach off her back. She just wants to keep the money in the family. So all she has to do is be moichel the ksuba. Once she's moichel the ksuba, the person who bought it is messed up. He loses his rights, and now the money stays in the family. She'll yashin it a couple of years later. Shama, she heard this. Oslo achilta, and she was moichelet, and this way she messed up the buyer. Amr Rab Nachman felt guilty that he said this because asinu atzmeinu ka'archei adiyanim. We look like we're getting involved. Rashi says asinu atzmeinu kekarev shabaldin. We have this exact same story with Rabbi Yochanan. It seems like I'm favoring because I'm the relative of a baldin. If someone comes to the yonim and he sets him up with good proofs to help the person who he favors, that's a wrong thing. I gave her an eitzah to win and to be mafsed the person who bought from her. I shouldn't have done that. When he originally gave that advice, what was he thinking? And now, why is that thinking no longer relevant? So at the beginning, he thought, listen, this is my relative. If it's my relative, I have to help them. I have to give them good advice. It doesn't pass for an Adam Choshev to do something like that, even for a relative. That's one shot. Rashi says, Adam Choshev Shani is yes, for a relative, you should. The problem is, someone who sees this might not realize that you're a relative. And then they'll do it even for people who aren't relatives. And that's why it wasn't appropriate that I did this. Zokta Helig Gemara. One second. Chaim Tzvi asked, why isn't there a shibuda to Rav Nosson? So I thought that I saw someone ask that kasha, and maybe the Gemara asked it later, but Tosh is asking out Garmi, there should be a chiyuv, not a Rav Nosson. But I thought I saw somewhere that asks al shibuda to Rav Nosson, but I'm not sure. Could be there is no shibuda to Rav Nosson over here, because when I buy if I lent you money and then you lent somebody else money, there's the shibuda to Rav Nosson. But here I didn't lend you money, I bought a right from you. So maybe you wouldn't have it in shibuda to Rav Nosson. But I'm not sure. But they ask al Garmi. You did an action that causes me a loss. Can I make a claim al Garmi? That's what Tosfos discusses. So al Garmi, you would have to pay that. Uh-huh. So at least they don't lose what they invested. Okay, Balter?
Just as an aside point, if the ksuba is so easily worthful, then why would it have any worth at all?
That's why the Gemara says it's only worth toivus hanah. It's worth a pittance because it's very unlikely.
Any debt document,
Yeah, but no, ksuba is less than a regular debt document because she might die first.
Probably on her document.
Right.
So it's an unlikely case. But any debt document can be canceled. So you have to follow
Right.
any debt.
There's a risk everywhere. That's right.
Wait a second. What is the shibuda to Rav Nosson? Let's hear the case of shibuda to Rav Nosson.
Reuben borrows money from Shimon.
Right.
So now Reuben owes Shimon money.
Right.
And then Shimon borrows money from Levi. So now Shimon owes Levi money. So Levi can go directly to Reuben and collect.
Why could he go directly to and collect? Maybe it's going to be worth it.
Because what does that mean? Who's being Michael? Yeah, you're right. If he's Michael and Echnami. But if he's not Michael.
If he's Michael,
he's not helping himself. He's making it worse. So Tosfos asked the kasha, why isn't it Garmi? So Tosfos answers like Avigdor says, Yitzchak Nira, just the third skinny line in Tosfos, you mechuyev because of Garmi, since she did the damage, because she was moichel, she has to pay the purchaser at least the purchase price. But for loy kolak suba. So she's still benefiting a lot because instead of the buyer being entitled to the full payout, the buyer will only be entitled to get his money refunded. So Gufa, Amar Shmuel, someone sold a shtar chayv to his friend. The chazar umachloi, and then he was moichel. Mochel, it's considered mochel. Even if the original malva dies and his child is mochel, it's also mochel and the buyer is out of luck. If this fellow who bought it is a pikeach and he wants to hedge his bets and protect himself, as soon as he purchases it, what he should do is mekarkish lezuze because of leishtar b'shmei. He should go to the original loiva, give him a couple of dollars, and says, "Do me a favor, write now the shtar directly to me. This way, I bought it anyway. You say I have the shtar that you owe Shimon money. Do me a favor, write it directly to me, and this way he will protect himself." Rashi mekarkish lezuze the loiva, let him dangle some money to the loiva. The soichroi bahen, and with the money he could hire or induce the loiva lichtev l'shtar chayv b'shmoi kodim sheyasu knunya ben shneim. So Rashi says kodim sheyasu knunya ben shneim. The malva and the loiva are making the deal that do me a favor, Mr. Malva. If you're moichelit, I'll give you. I'm not sure how they would be. I'm not sure how the cut would work, but somehow they would make some sort of deal. Amar Meimar, man the doin. What they would do?
No longer the sale. The creditor and debtor will be unable to collaborate.
Right, but if they would collaborate, what would they do?
The creditor will no longer be able to prevent the debt, even if the debtor, since the buyer has directly.
Right, but why would they make such a deal? Yeah, I'm not sure what would induce them to make such a deal. Amar Meimer, man the don din gami. What if you are don din gami? So here, the fact that he was moichel would be considered gami. Mag bebei demei shtor ma'al. You would be able to collect a full star. Man the loy don din gami. If you don't pass din gami, which is if you're not mechayiv, someone who's goyim a hefset to his friend, like Rashi says, then magvebei b'demei nayara ba'alma. At least he could collect back minimal the paper.
I think it's like buying an option. I'll take a little bit of money because it's unlikely that he's going to waive.
It's exactly what it is.
Debt. I'd rather take a little bit now.
Now, what does it mean if you're not done doing the gami? All I could collect from the malva who's moichel is the paper. I can't collect the paper. I have the paper. So Rashi explains, so there's no payment required. I obviously didn't tell you the chayv because I was moichel the chayv, so all you have is the paper. Have uvda. There was a story, the kafir Rafram the Rabashi. There was a story where Rafram forced, so Rabashi was the dayan, and Rafram was heckling Rav Ashi with kashas and rayas, and because of that, the Agvebei Kikishur Latalmi. He got the Malva, who was Moichel the Choiv, to pay back a complete payment. What does that mean? What is a Kikishur Latalmi? It's a beam that you're drawing pictures on. Rashi says, Kikishur Latalmi, Klemer Giboy Gomer. Rav Rafram was able to induce Rav Ashi to collect the full payment from the Malva, who was Moichel the Choiv. Kol Ahavse Diktik Boy, he was makbid and he was medaktik on every last penny. Kasher Yidaktik Halokeach Koira Lotzer B'Tzuros. If you have an artist who bought a beam, not to build with, but he was going to draw beautiful pictures on this beam. He was decorating a beam. I'm not sure exactly what they did that for. Lotzer B'Tzuros Shalokeach Yishor B'Chalaka. There he's makbid that the piece of wood that he buys should be perfectly smooth, so it should act as a good canvas. I guess he was making some type of art. So just like someone is very makbid that the wood should be perfect, so too Rab Ashi ended up collecting down to the last penny on behalf of this person who bought the choy from the Malva. Amar Memesh Radio Kama. Hi Mandika Ali Subasisha. It's 6:28, right? So we go to 6:30. Oh, 6:30 slichas. Oh, I thought 6:40. Okay, we'll stop right here. Good. I want to stop. I want to stop 5 minutes before. Yeah.
That's what it says on the
Yeah.
roof.